Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I'm pleased to welcome Tom Worthington from TAM Asset Management. How are you, Tom?
Good, Ria. How are you?
Great, thank you. Now, the reason I have you on today is the world has changed, as we all know. But even before the change, everybody was sort of starting to talk about the way they did investing, how they wanted to go a little bit towards something that was kinder to the environment. I think there was a story not too long ago, well, maybe about 6 months ago, about a massive investment company in the United States taking all of their investments into something called ESG investments.
Yep.
Now, what is ESG investment?
Well, it stands for environmental social governance. It's they used to call it ethical investment or social responsible investment, so RSI. It's always changing name, but basically it's trying to invest to do good for various different causes, whether it be social governance in the workplace, in the public, whether it's environmental. It's basically trying to change the way investment uses its capital to invest in. So it'll look at more things like carbon neutral buildings rather than the traditional office blocks and things like that. So it's just a very different approach, really, of investing. You've got negative screening, positive screening, which we can go to in a bit if you want, of how you choose an ethical investment, which is probably the hardest part of the subject, is actually choosing what it is.
Is there anybody special that, how do you go about choosing these? Are there a group of people that choose them? Is there different criteria that they have to meet? Explain that to me.
There's been several boards pop up over the last couple of years that define what is accepted as ethical or green or deep green or various different, because we see it as kind of variant shades of green. So we say light green might be someone that says, right, I won't invest in alcohol and tobacco and oil, but I'll invest in the rest. That's quite a light green approach. That's just being slightly ethical. But then there's a deep green where they'll be very negatively screened, where they will not take on a company in their portfolio unless they have some kind of local scheme to help the local community. They're doing something towards the environment. They're proactively looking to make a change, both in things like carbon output, the governance socially, various ways they run the company, going paperless and that kind of thing. And there's everything in between, if you like.
So what are the investments like? When we talk about traditional investments and in the past, whether it be stock market, whatever it may be, the fact is there was always sort of this huge concern about return on investment. Now, when you decide to go into the ESG investment, are there still the possibilities of the same return on investment that you would in just say, throwing your money into an investment scheme and saying buy whatever and just get me the best returns?
Over the last 3 years, I'm talking for TAM specifically now. Every fund's slightly different. Over the last 3 years, we've seen actually ethical's done better than traditional. So I've actually done an article for a association that we've just joined called FIFA, and comparing Premier and ethical, you saw over the last kind of 3 to 3.5 years, it actually started to overtake. And actually in downturn markets or bear markets like we've experienced during the COVID, we actually saw a better resilience in the portfolios. So we didn't see them go down as much as like the mainstream, because I think one of the reasons definitely is people have become more empathetic, especially to other people during the pandemic. And it's driven more investors towards going ethical or socially responsible, ESG, whatever you want to call it, more than traditionally they would have even 6 months ago.
Do you think that not only that they're being empathetic, but they're also realizing that the human population is damaging the environment to the state where we will see more and more of this kind of thing, or we're completely ruining the environment as a whole? So do you think that this is just going to continue, that people will say, we're going to invest this way. We're not going to start playing games the same way we do with many other investments, because it is sustainable stuff.
There's definitely been more of a recognition of a global scale now, because we've seen huge inflows of money through into our ethical portfolios, because basically, and it's what I write about as well in one of the articles, is it's great to have a cause where you're going to save. I'll use one of the charities that are local, Save the Med. It's a fantastic cause. They do fantastic work. You could also have something for orphans, and you can have something for poverty, for war veterans. All great causes, but all in all, if you're going to make the world a better place, you've got to invest a little bit into everything. Doing just one cause actually sometimes can negatively impact the rest of them. It creates some negative feelings towards them. Why are they getting funded? Why aren't we? It can, out-process other parts of the ESG world. So really, because we run a portfolio and diversify across kind of all sectors and most regions, then it will have a greater impact in the long run, with a little bit going into everything rather than a lot going into one little thing, if that makes sense.
Well, say, for example, somebody had 500 euros, just a random number,
Yeah.
500 euros to invest per month. How many portfolios or investments, sorry, would that make them part of?
With us, that would probably give you a holding of something around, I don't know off the top of my head today, but probably about 80 holdings all in all. You'd probably hold something around 5 to 7 funds. So we're a fund of funds. So we'd make a selection of around about 7 ESG funds, and those ESG funds would all hold different stock as well. So each one of those would have stocks in different companies or different green bonds, as they're called, different ways of having. I mean, there are still mainstream instruments in there like gilts, bonds, but we are screening them to make sure that they are seen as or used as ESG as possible. What I mean by that is, we'll say, are they making a difference? Are they not doing that? Are they doing this? Before we put them in. So there are still mainstream things in there available. The thing is, we just take out some mainstream parts that we don't see as ethical, if that makes sense.
If somebody said we want to go completely deep green portfolio, is that a possibility? And are they going to have the exact same sort of return on investment if somebody said, you know what, as long as it is, ESG investment certified, it doesn't matter where on the scale it is. Is there going to be a big difference?
Well, then you get into the argument of the definition. So when you go deep green, do you go nuclear? Because nuclear is one man's Fukushima and it's another man's green energy. Do you invest in BP oil? Because it's an oil company, they have oil spills, they're a danger to the environment, but yet they spend the most on renewable energy resource in the world out of any single company. So it all then really comes down to the individual, because everyone's got a different definition of deep green. For me, personally, I would probably say no to oil and yes to wind farms, but then wind farms also kill birds and they ruin the landscape. So you've got to make a compromise somewhere. So there's nothing really on a portfolio scale that you could call deep green. There's always going to be a bit of a lighter shade to it. For example, if you invest in a property fund, you invest in hotels because hotels sell pornography and alcohol, which is unethical. How far do you want to go with it? So once you start taking wind farm energy out of it, when you start taking companies that aren't doing anything socially responsible locally and on a global scale, once you take out all these things, what are you left with? So yes, on the start of the question, that will affect the performance if you want to go deep green, purely because it's so hard to define deep green, because everyone's definition is different. You're going to be probably left with so few choices.
When somebody is thinking about doing investment, is there like a minimum amount of money that they can invest every single month, or is there a maximum or a recommended, minimum?
I mean, with It depends on what company you use. For TAM, for example, we have the Seafarer Saver, and we have. Well, you can sign on to that online, so you don't need a intermediary, you don't need a financial advisor if you don't want one. You can choose between a few different risk categories. Ethical for now isn't available through the Seafarer Saver, but it's something I'm really trying to work on. Um, For us, we would take from €100 a month and from a minimum investment of about 1,000 a month, depending on the portfolios. We have different portfolios. For example, we run Sharia money, which isn't really that applicable in the yachting market because there's not that many Muslims in yachting that I've met. Um, Hopefully there'll be more and more, so we can introduce it as an option. Ethical, obviously, I think it would be the first one I'd want to push in because it's becoming more and more talked about. Even 2 or 3 years ago, um, people didn't know that there was ethical investing was a mainstream thing. You know, it was something that you did on the side. You'd hold a green fund, and in the European marketplace, there's a lot of good green funds. You know, you've got big players like Rathbones, BlackRock, who you were hinting at earlier, who put in, I think it was about 81 billion at the end of last year into ESG funds. And those were great, but usually what they were done is you had your mainstream investment and then you had that as kind of an add-on at the side to do your bit. Whereas now there's actually, if you use someone like TAM, who are discretionary portfolio managers, who can actually vet the funds, vet the fund managers, vet the performance, have a macro view from fund managers in-house that say, right, we've got a macro top-down view of the economy. So we think, you know, emerging markets are the place to be. So geographically and equities are the place to be, and in an asset class, we can then mold those ESG portfolios to match our view on a macro scale as well, so that we can hopefully outperform what people would be able to do by just holding a single fund here or, you know, an add-on fund there, if you like.
Well, going back to the seafarers, now that is specifically for mariners,
Yeah.
and you were saying that it's as far as the ESG investment that isn't quite available through seafarers. Is there a time that you think, 6 months or a year before it is available?
Well, we've just been licensed in Spain, which is our European office. So we're down in Port Adriano, where I'm speaking to you from now. So I would say it's a tough one because we applied for a Spanish license in February 2019 and they said it would take 6 to 8 weeks. So I would hope within 6 months, but it could, I mean, realistically, it could be a year. Now we've got the Spanish office. In the UK, we've got a thing called Greenfinch, which is the same system as Seafarer. You go online and you can do it yourself. You can sign up. A great thing for this, especially towards the seafarers community, is because I've worked with the seafarer community, especially in Mallorca and Palma, for a long time. Is a lot of unexpected things happen in yachting. Owners can die, they sell their boats, you can get fired at the drop of a hat. You know, COVID can hit and they minimize a crew, they go to a skeleton crew for a year. You need access to your money. Now, while investing should be taken on as a long-term view, you know, at
Mhm.
least kind of 3 to 5 years, you know, they might take that view at the start, but their situation might change within 12 months. Whereas if you've got a steady job, you know, let's say a normal job as a teacher or something like that, whereas you know you've got another 20 years of education in front of you, your situation might not change as much. So for us, launching the Seafarer Saver was specifically to not lock them in, to not have any penalties to withdraw their money, and to have 24-hour transparency. Because while we're based in Mallorca and there's a lot of yacht crew here, we can have people that are, you know, on charter in the Caribbean, or they're in New Zealand, or they're doing a world cruise. So, and these yacht crew, if they've got guests on board, they could be working 18 hours a day. They can't phone us at 2 in the morning and say, can we have a valuation? So we've got this online system where 24/7 they can access it, see what funds they hold. It's updated by Bloomberg Live 5 times a day. So it's new information. It's not done minute by minute, like something like eToro, but it's something that they can go through and see whenever they've got chance what their investment's doing, if you like.
Well, I have heard a lot of stories, and actually, I did a feature back in February in regards to a lot of crew that were not happy with the way their past investments had been handled. And part of that reason why was because they were stuck into something. And, the nature of seafarers is that, crew anyways, is that everything happens so fast. They want to invest, and not a lot of them do, but some of them, when they do come in 18, 19, 20 years old, they're interested in investing. But they don't really know much about it because it's not something that is, pretty much straight across the world in our school system. But they're in port for a very short period of time. So somebody comes on board, they've got a 30-page contract. I don't even think at my age I'm going to be reading a 30-page contract. I'm going to go, do I trust you? Well, my captain trusts you. Okay, I'll sign away my life. And then, as you said, something happens, and all of a sudden they realize that what they signed wasn't what they thought it was.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think straight across the yachting industry, people are really concerned about when it comes to investing. So, it's good to hear that Seafarers is set up. And what was the other one you mentioned?
Seafarers and sorry, that's our UK one, which is the ethical, which I want to replicate here. It's
Right.
called greenfinch.com.
So if you are a yacht crew member, you don't actually have to go with the Seafarers option. You can go with the other option if you are really, really concerned about the environment. Is there a possibility, say if they go through that one, and then 6 months to a year, all of a sudden it's available through Seafarers, can they switch that over?
Yep. So we're actually working on a different approach to seafarers as well, because the more I've talked to financial advisors, we work with a lot of financial advisors, and yes, there are good ones and there are bad ones out there. Unfortunately, a lot of bad ones have been active in the yachting community, and they've had negative experience with it. And having launched Seafarer, I was a bit worried whether financial advisors wouldn't be that happy because we work with them, whether I'd be taking business away from them. However, 99% of the ones I've talked to have said, in fact, when it's under 25, 30,000 euros, there's not much we can do for them. So there's not many good products for that range, 0 to 25, 30,000. And second, because the fees that they charge are so small, it's hard to give the client what they deserve, which is the time and the transparency. And so, in fact, it's actually good for advisors, and it gives them something to offer the clients as well. Is they can say, right, before you have a capital of 25, 30,000, here's something that's very cost effective. Our fees are less than 1% a year, which, if you compare it to most financial products, that's about a third of the average cost of things that were being offered to seafarers before. And the fact that it's not tied in. And if you get to a large capital and feel like, right, okay, I've got 50 grand now, I want to have a bit of advice on this. Maybe I want to switch into ethical, or maybe I want to put more in and switch into Premier, which is our larger portfolios. Then they can actually hire a financial advisor. The financial advisor can take over and start using that as well.
So they have the options then, because I can imagine that a lot of people are quite nervous. They're not really sure what the future is, and the fact
Yeah.
that they are actually interested in investing is just a win straight across the board, anyways. Because we see that a lot of yacht crew that are older. I've spoken to people that are in their 50s and 60s, and they actually haven't or weren't taught that it was time to start banking, doing investments, that sort of thing, back in their teens and early 20s when the money was great. And so they're a bit lost now. So the idea that you have something for, a smaller amount of money where they can put their feet in, they can test the waters, they can try it out and see how it works for them with, not no fear attached as they have had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, our first client was, I think it's €1,000, and she was going to add monthly, but I spoke to her a couple of times on the phone and said, look, if you're nervous, put a little bit of money in and just watch it for 6 months and see what happens before you put it in. We want them to be comfortable. I said, if it goes down a few percent and you want out, you can take it out. But even during COVID, our biggest loss, I think, on portfolios was around 10% mark. So, okay, it's €100, but it's not one of these, you're not hearing the 50,000s and stuff that we've heard. I did watch your interview on the investment awareness and things like that, which is very good. You're not going to see those same stories with this, because it's a very different scenario. And also, it's something that we've done before, we're good at. In the UK, we've got 70,000 clients in workplace pensions that give us between 10 quid and 200 quid a month. So we're used to this range. For us, it's a very good business model. And I think for the seafarer community, it's something that was needed. You see a lot of guests and owners of boats, and they talk about stock market doing this. So I think a lot of seafarers know that it's out there, but it's giving them access to it, because when you hear a boat owner say, "Oh yeah, I bought 2 million in stock from that," well, yeah, he probably phoned up his stockbroker that went and got him a good price and dealt with it and got him 10% under the market, etc., etc. But for the average person, let alone yacht crew, that's not feasible. It's not something that is open to the public. So this way, they can access funds which normally they couldn't access. For example, our JP Morgan Global Bond Fund that we hold would charge you 1.5% if you went in as public. If you go through us, they charge you 0.06%, because we trade so much money with them. You'd also need a minimum of, I think it's 50,000 euros to go into that fund, where with us, it would probably work out about 100 euros. So it's also opening fair pricing to the market. So not only does it open a category that they couldn't get into, it offers it an institutional rate, because we don't put anything on top of it. We charge the client what we're being charged. And then we're very transparent with fees and say we take 0.25% a year, which isn't much money. And that's what we charge for choosing the portfolios for you. And when things like COVID hit, making sure that portfolio isn't going to skyrocket down. We don't want a huge fall, because traditionally, especially in ethical, when you had these standalone funds, the client would then have to go either into a trading platform, phone their trader or phone their financial advisor, sign a document, get it changed, where with us, that's all done for them. So they don't have to, if you're on charter, and the market's dropped 30%, you might not hear about it till you get into land again. If you're doing Atlantic crossing, you might not, on a smaller boat, you might not hear about it for 3 weeks. So, have it being, I think it's going to sound very corny, but the guests and the owner put their lives in the hands of the crew. So we look after the crew financially, if you like, in return, because they've not got the time or the knowledge usually.
Well, it sounds great, because I know that a lot of people, and especially nowadays, we're very worried about the environment, but as well, people are becoming more aware of their financial future. They're becoming more aware of the fact that at some point they're going to retire. They want to make sure that, they're able to afford that house, or they're able to afford a retirement, period. And the idea that they have control of their money and they can watch how their money works whenever they have access to the internet, and that, you say it's only 5 times a day, but I'm telling you right now, 5 times a day is probably a hell of a lot more than the 5 times a month when you contact your broker or your investment advisor, that you would get from anybody else, and for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, and I think as well, when you're talking about people more aware of their financial outlook, I think there's been a big wake up in the yachting community, because they've seen their owners who, not every boat, but large boats have very, very deep pockets, if not unlimited. And they've suddenly seen these people that, have these tens or hundreds of millions worth of boat and crew scraping for money. Halving the crew to a skeleton crew because that's the minimum the insurance requires. Not doing a season because it's too expensive, or moving their boat to another port because it's cheaper. So I think it's a realization that, even the big boys out there have struggled through this. So having something set up for financial future is more important than ever.
Right. Well, we're going to make sure to provide all of the information. If you are interested in the seafarers, you can actually head over to Yachting International Radio's website, and there is a tab on there that will take you directly to the seafarers information. And as well, you can sign up or just check them out, get the information you're looking for. And we do really look forward to seeing and hearing if indeed this ESG investment does come for the Seafarer Savers concept, because I know that yachting as a whole is very interested in ethical investment.
Yeah, well, now we've got the Spanish license. It's going to be something I work on next. Seafarers was a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of, even though when you look at the website that it might not look that way, there's a lot of technology that's gone into it to be able to onboard people automatically, to upload passports, and then we've got a back-end system that has to do anti-money laundering checks. There's a lot that goes into it. I've got to be honest, a little bit more than I thought when we started the project. But now it's up and running. We've got the Spanish license. That it will be the next thing on the agenda. And yeah, also, I mean, I can't give advice as an investment manager, but I'm happy to, if someone's got questions and they want to sign up to the Seafarer, they can contact us. They can set up a chat or a telephone call, and I'm happy to run through any specifics on the way TAM invests, the way Seafarers works. Like I said, I can't give investment advice as in you should do this, you should do that. But I can help them through the process. We've also got 2 little videos on there which explain the Seafarer in brief. So if you've got any questions about that, email us or give us a phone.
Well, we're going to make sure to provide all the information for anybody that is interested in taking care of their future, because I would advise it's one of those things that should be taught in school, but unfortunately isn't. And hopefully we'll see that change in the coming generations. But Tom, I thank you very much for your time. I would like to have you back again.
Yeah, I'd like to be back again.
Well, it's great. As things change and as life changes, people are worried about their money. And to have somebody like you able to come on who knows specifically what those in the industry are needing, because you've worked with the industry for so long, I think your input is invaluable.
Thank you.
So thank you, Tom. Once again, this is Tom Worthington from TAM Asset Management. We have been speaking about ESG investment. If you are interested in at all the Seafarers portion of it, check out our website, but as well, all the information for Tom in order to get a hold of him will be underneath this interview. You've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Tune in again for another episode.